We're 24 hours away from the start of Leafs training camp. What's the biggest question we hope to get answered throughout the next couple of weeks? We'll get into that, takeaways from the Maple Leafs charity golf tournament, and more on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, the daily Maple Leafs centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. What's going on, Dave? How you feeling on a Tuesday?
Feeling pretty good. I still get asked these questions about the missing O's in this Leafs Twitter stuff. And
any idea? Anything?
I can't figure it out. The only thing I've seen that makes any sort of sense is where the O's and the Forever logo are missing, and it's like in the 8 and 10 spot on the clock, which is supposed to be like when the Leaf season begins, but like I personally don't think that's what it is, because I think at Scotiabank Arena they also took, like, on the veto board, they took away all the O's there too.
Okay. Yeah, I honestly have no idea what it could possibly mean. Like, yeah, so you know, the Leafs Forever, they posted this on social media. They took out the O, and now we're all left to wonder what the heck is going on. Why did they do this? No idea. No idea why the Maple Leafs did this. But it did have Twitter ablaze, and that's kind of, sometimes Twitter's a fun place. X, I guess, is a fun place because people start speculating, the conspiracy theories come out. I saw someone mentioned something about the O-Dog. Maybe the O-Dog was going to get, named as a assistant GM or something. I don't know, but I have no idea what it could possibly mean. But I'm sure in the next couple of days we will find out, because Leafs training camp officially going to be opening up tomorrow with medicals and media day, and then we'll get to some on-ice training sessions beginning on Thursday. So perhaps tomorrow we'll find out what the missing O's meant, that caused such a stir on Leafs Twitter over the weekend. Speaking of training camps, we'll kind of be doing this every day this week, where we've got some burning questions that we want answered heading into training camp, that we think are the biggest question marks about this team that we want to learn or should learn throughout the course of camp. And it's going to be an interesting camp because it's going to be much different than any other year, because it's not a Sheldon Keefe led training camp. It is now a Craig Berube led training camp, Dave. So, lots of different, new things will be happening this year. So I'm excited to see, what a Berube led camp looks like for this group. But we're going to be asking a couple of burning questions, one each day for the rest of the week. And today's question, and something that you and I and a lot of Leafs Nation really are wondering at this point, when you look at the roster, you kind of start to put your lineups together, and you notice that there are some quite large gaps and holes in what you would think would be like a cup contending roster, but namely and weirdly, like, who's going to play down the middle, Dave? Like, that's one of the questions that I have. And going into camp, I'm excited to see what the line combinations are going to look like. What lineups Craig Berube is going to tinker with. Is he going to try some different things like we saw Sheldon Keefe do a lot? That's a big question that I have. Who is going to play down the middle? Because outside of Auston Matthews, who I think is spoken for as the top line center, there's question marks at 2C, 3C, and then depending on what they do at those positions, there could be competition at 4C as well. So the center ice position after Auston Matthews, very murky situation, is it not?
It is. And it's been for how many years, right? Like,
Well, at least for a lot of the time you've had Matthews and Tavares, but now
Yeah.
it's like, is Tavares even 2C? Like, is he going to play there for sure? Like now there's even more question marks than usual.
Yeah, like that's always the thing. Everyone whenever they talk about the Leafs center, that's they always like it's Matthews, Tavares, and then it's like the voice gets a little less stern, a little more strong after that, based on whoever you're talking about, right? And so it's a real puzzler because we were talking about the offseason and what they did and what they didn't do. What they didn't do was go and get that natural third line, like someone who could definitely that we could see right from the start of camp be that third line center, which made me think that okay, they think they have that person already, and they didn't feel like they had to go and do it.
Yeah, that's entirely possible. They could think that that guy's already, there, and who that is, I guess, is where we can get into first. Like, let's first talk about the options the Maple Leafs, I guess, have at the center ice position. So we can kind of go through like an organizational depth chart type of ranking type thing, I guess. Where Auston Matthews is clearly up at the tippy top, like he's going to be this team's number one center. That's not even a conversation. He's now the captain of the team. He's coming off a 69 goal year. He is the unquestioned number one center. The number two center on this team. I guess for now we could say it's still John Tavares, I suppose. Coming off, what was not, it was just we could call it down year for Tavares, but maybe that's just kind of what he is at this point. Now that he's over, the hill of the 30, 32 years old. What does he still have left in the tank? Is he someone who, maybe better to shift off to the wing? Is he better to be pushed down the roster a little bit? I guess we'll find out. Outside of that, you've got David Kampf, who's a natural center, another guy who struggled at times last year, especially when it came to producing offense. It took him a little bit to get going defensively as well. Connor Dewar is a guy they brought in last year, the trade deadline. He can play down the middle. He'll be, vying for one of those spots. Steven Lorentz, a PTO, will be vying for one of those center spots, and well, all positions he can play. He's got positional versatility. Same with Dewar, but those are guys who could play center who are going to vie for it. And then Pontus Holmberg, obviously, we saw last year play a little bit of center, so he'll be another guy who'll be in the fold. And I believe that would be it in terms of natural centermen that we think of who have played the position at the NHL level. Correct, or am I missing somebody?
Well, if you're gonna be like Fraser Minton.
Yes, Minton will also be in the mix, assuming
I know
he's
he hasn't played
healthy.
a full season. He played a few games, but
we'll see him down the middle
Yeah.
at camp. We'll definitely see him down the middle at camp, and he'll get a good look. So Fraser Minton is another guy, and Max Domi also is another player, who played a lot of center last year, and right now could be penciled in maybe as their third line center if that's what they're looking at right now. So that would make a lot of sense. But there's one name that we haven't mentioned that is kind of getting a lot of buzz, maybe is the right word. Like there's been a couple of people who are suggesting that maybe the Leafs do have another centerman in the mix that they could possibly use as not just the 3C, but the 2C that could push Tavares down to a third line center role, which really would round out this team if that were the case. Let's take a break and talk about who that player could be on the other side, Dave. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book, and we got something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season afternoon out-of-market game. All you're going to need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano, got Dave Morassutti with me. We're here each and every day, Monday through Friday, all season long, covering your Toronto Maple Leafs. You can find the podcast wherever you get your podcasts at. Also up on YouTube as well. We're on our road to 6K. We hope to get to 6K by puck drop. Just about 150 or so subscribers away from that number. So we're hoping to get there by puck drop. So if you are an everydayer and you've yet to subscribe on YouTube, we ask that you please do. That'd be awesome. And if you're new to the podcast and you're just kind of following us, you're just kind of watching us for the first time, and you're enjoying the conversation so far today, maybe put a little subscribe on there. That would be fantastic. Okay, Dave, we were talking about the center position, and the big question marks we have is who the heck's going to play down the middle coming into this year. I'm sure we'll see all of the players that we talked about get a chance throughout training camp to play down the middle in some sort of combination. One player we have not talked about yet, who's starting to pick up some steam as a possibility that could play down the middle and could play a prominent role as his team's second line center. And that player, Dave, is William Nylander. Lots of buzz about possibly seeing the Maple Leafs utilize William Nylander this year as the team's second line center to kind of balance out this roster. And you could see, Matthews at 1C, Nylander 2C, pushing Tavares down to a 3C role where that would make him just a super uber dependable third line center who could provide you some offense. And then that would slot David Kampf into the 4C hole, which is clearly where he is more suited to be, not as the third line center. What do you make of that possibility, Dave? Do you like it?
I mean, it just seems like we remember when Brad Treliving first came last year, that he felt really confident that that's something that they really want to do with Nylander. It was just the head coach was not exactly willing to give it the full go. They tried it. Sheldon Keefe tried it, but Sheldon Keefe also it just didn't feel like that was the right call for the team long term. And I don't know if maybe that'll change under Craig Berube. I don't know. But it just, for me, it also kind of, I wouldn't say justified, but it also kind of maybe puts out why this team gave Nylander the contract that they did, obviously, other than the production he had last year. Maybe they feel like, you know what, he's a center in our eyes, right? I think there's things that Nylander does that makes me think that he has the potential to be a center. It's just, does he have the willingness to do everything that a center requires? Is he willing to do that every single night? And look, it's not us talking, only us talking about it. I'm pretty sure Bruce Boudreau talked about it on Leafs Morning Take. I think I've seen The Athletic talk about it. Like, there are people who think that this could be a real possibility. I'd be very intrigued to see if that's something that gets either you see it at camp or it gets asked of Craig Berube before camp starts.
Yeah, and I bet I would imagine we do see it at camp, because if this is actually a possibility, like, you got to figure it out. You got to, know now. Like, training camp is the time to tinker and to experiment with lines and experiment with things. And, last year we did see Nylander get experimented with down the middle a little bit. And there was the thought, okay, maybe he's going to be a center. And we see, Matthews, Tavares, and Nylander all anchored their own lines. And then it didn't really end up happening. The team ended up going in a different direction. I think Minton made the team out of camp, and then he kind of slotted in at 3C, and then Domi took over as a centerman. So, that's kind of where they decided to go last year. But yeah, the big question, obviously, and anyone who plays center knows that there's a far more defensive responsibility that you have when you're playing center as opposed to playing the wing. So can Nylander really hone in on those responsibilities while he's playing? Because that's kind of been like the knock on Willie is all gas, all offense, not much defense out there. And it's a fair criticism to Willie's game. Like, he's not Mitch Marner, where he's an elite defensive forward. Nylander has been prone to not be that. There's been times and spurts where he'll show a little bit of jam and a little bit more on defense, but if you're center, you got to control that middle of the ice. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if they give this a shot, if they give this a go. I'd like to see it at the very least. And then, it's a chance to really balance out that lineup and make things difficult. And you could get some scoring from that bottom six if you have Tavares in your bottom six. And then Nylander's been proven that he can anchor a line. He's been able to do that throughout his career, whether, he was playing on line with, Kerfoot or Galchenyuk, or if he was, playing on a line with some other, bottom, not scrubs, but bottom six players. Is this an opportunity for him to play alongside like a Nick Robertson potentially on one side, and someone else on the other? Could possibly, you could get Marner in the fold, Bobby McMahon possibly in the fold, so it's an opportunity here for William Nylander to show, hey, I can do this. And the contract, I never even thought about that, but that is definitely would make more sense, I guess, for him to be making that much money as a centerman, as opposed to being a winger for this Maple Leafs team. They'll certainly get a lot more value out of that contract if that's the case. So I would expect to see it. I'm excited to see what it looks like should this happen, and we'll see. Everything's kind of got to be a wait and see mode. That's what training camp's all about: experimenting, trying things, and figuring out what works and what doesn't.
I'm just curious to see how the dynamics change, right? Like when you have Nylander on the wing, you already know that it's likely Tavares that lines up beside him. I mean, they could also just gone with a different center with Nylander, but we know that Nylander is going to be second line or first line, right? But if you put Nylander as center, then you really think like, okay, who's he going to be playing with? Like, who are the ideal line mates then that flank on the wings for him? And that's to me the bigger question. If they do put Nylander as centers, how do they maybe, I wouldn't say insulate him, but who do they put with him to make it more of a success maybe than they have in past years, right?
Yeah, no, it's a fair question. And you're probably looking at, like the Nick Robertson, I would think, would be one player that you could possibly use for that, on the left side. Like, if you're playing with Nylander, you got to have someone who's got some speed, and then you ought to have someone who's got a little bit of grits, like maybe Bobby McMahon, could possibly be someone who goes in there. Willie Nyes possibly could be somebody, who's going to go to the front of the net. He'll go and dig for some pucks. I'm thinking like those would be the players, or maybe you set him up with a Max Domi who can, quite literally set him up, and play playmaker for Nylander to get him the puck so he can shoot it and rip it. Like that, I would think that those would probably be the players that you would think would make sense next to William Nylander. I don't know. Are you thinking anyone else?
Well, I'm wondering if like do they give a guy like Calle Yarncroke like a chance in the top six and playing with him just because of that defensive ability of that he has as well. But you also need guys that can score, right? And guys that can produce offense and as you said, provide a little bit of speed. So I do like Robertson. I do think they're going to try to get him into the top six or at least the middle six to start camp. I think they're going to want to show that maybe whether it's him getting the chance to show what he can do, or even just them saying, we think you have that ability to produce, right? And we're going to give you that opportunity to see if you can go and grab it.
Yeah, I think he'll be showcased quite a bit throughout camp and early in the season in a top six role. And if there's a taker or someone who likes what they see, maybe we see a Robertson trade come at some point. But yeah, so we'll see. That's one of the big questions that we all have right now is what does it look like after Matthews? What does it look like down the middle? Lots of question marks, and maybe William Nylander factoring in at 2C could really answer a lot of those questions and slot people in and players in, a lot better than they are currently constructed if Nylander were to play the wing this upcoming season. So something, a storyline to track and follow throughout the training camp, which again begins tomorrow with medicals, and then the on ice training sessions beginning on Thursday. All right. On the other side, we will recap, I guess, and get to our takeaways from the annual Leafs and Legends charity golf tournament that took place at Rattlesnake yesterday. Chris Tanev was talking, Steven Lorentz was talking, all the new Maple Leafs getting a chance to speak with the media, and Yanni Hakanpää as well getting a chance to speak with the Leafs media as well. So we'll get to their takeaways from those media sessions on the other side. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you on the Locked On Leafs podcast. So the Maple Leafs host an annual Leafs and Legends charity golf classic. They did this yesterday at Rattlesnake Point Golf Club in Milton. It's really that's kind of the kickoff to the new season, realistically. So they got their golf tournament, and then a couple days later they start to all roll into Ford Performance Center for their medicals, and then training camp starts up a couple, day after that. So this is kind of the start. Things are starting to get real, and things are starting to happen here, Dave. And it won't be too long before we see these guys in game action next week. The first game's 21st, 22nd. So it's coming up. It's not too far away. Less than a week. So should be interesting. So what were your takeaways? We heard from a lot of Maple Leafs yesterday at the golf tournament. Lots of guys out there chatting with the media. A lot of the newcomers also getting a chance to speak with them. So the media was happy to talk to them. Any big takeaways that you had?
I found it interesting with Chris Tanev speaking, and like the first person that he brought up was Gary Roberts, right? And this is I think when you think about like coming into the Toronto spotlight, like not everyone's, I guess, fully aware of what to expect sometimes. And like it's interesting that he sought out Roberts, and he said
with Roberts.
I don't actually know where like their relationship kind of came through. Oh, sorry. Yeah, he trained with So I read it here. He has trained with Roberts for most of his career. So
yeah,
that would kind of make a lot of sense. Chris Tanev is a beast.
Hey, that's how you get that longevity, man. You play with you work with Gary Roberts, like that dude gets you ready to go.
He does. But I think the best one here is Roberts told Tanev to be yourself, but to also be good to the fans. And like that to me, it kind of speaks to how, certain players, when you embrace everything that comes with being a Leaf, generally it works out, right? Chris Tanev, in my opinion, doesn't need to do a lot off the ice, I think, to appease fans. I think his play on the ice will do that. I think a lot of Leafs fans will gravitate towards a player like Tanev, because players like Tanev usually are fan favorites, that hard-working style guy that's going to put all on the line for the Leafs to win. But I just think it's I just think that when you hear about that, be good to the fans, it kind of just shows like if you're in the fans' favor, you're doing pretty good for yourself. And this is a player that's going to be here for a while, right? He's not here for a year. He's not here for 2 years. He's here for the long haul.
Yeah. Well, Dave, the fans treat these players like gods. We know this. We were told that earlier this summer, if you recall.
Right.
Treat them like, we treat them like gods, right? So yeah, if you treat the fans well, they will treat you well. But the best treat you can give fans is a winning product, right? That's ultimately what fans want to see. They want to see Chris Tanev out there blocking shots, killing penalties, moving the puck, and make sure that he's not fishing pucks out of the back of his net. That's what fans want to see ultimately, and they obviously want to see him hoist the Stanley Cup in a Maple Leaf sweater. That would be the ultimate fan gift that Tanev could give to the Maple Leafs fans, for him to be a legend in the city of Toronto, where he's from. But yeah, it's nice, that he's leaning on former Maple Leafs and asking them, hey man, what's it like? What should I be expecting? How can I, best present myself to this team, to this fan base, for this organization? Just go to show that Tanev, cares. Now he's a Maple Leaf, and he cares about being it, and wants to be the best Leaf he possibly can be. Another guy who's in the same boat who I saw spoke yesterday was Steven Lorentz. I mean, PTO, so I guess not the exact same boat. He still has to earn his way onto the
Mhm.
team. But he spoke about how he really wanted to come to Toronto. He always wanted to be a Toronto Maple Leaf, local guy, wants to win a Stanley Cup here and be part of the team that brings a cup to Toronto. And he's one of the, 3 players that were brought in this offseason that have Stanley Cup pedigree, right? Lorentz, Ekman Larson, and Stolarz all won the Stanley Cup last year with the Florida Panthers. So Lorentz is hoping to do that again. Chose Toronto to come and win a cup for what was his boyhood team. So that was something that we got to hear from as well. And I know you liked what you heard from Anthony Stolarz too, Dave.
Yeah, I didn't even realize Anthony Stolarz has the same agent as Joseph Woll. So I mean, when players have same agents, generally they have pretty good relationships because there's like events that they do together and things like that.
Mhm.
But I guess he was trying to. The reporters were trying to see if maybe there's a potential of him saying like there's gonna be a battle for the crease, right? He wants to go and earn the starter's job, and he took a good approach to it, just to say like, just gonna there's an opportunity to earn playing time and just go and do it. And the best thing is if we're playing well, we're team's doing well,
Yeah.
right? Like if I'm earning the playing time, that means the team's doing well, and so and he was very complimentary to Joseph Woll too, and I think he just truly understands the situation, right? I don't think anything was promised of him. I don't think he's expecting anything specifically from the Leafs when it comes to his playing time too. Like, I think the expectations are pretty clear for him. But and he also got to talk about fantasy football. He is 2-0. I don't know how you're doing in fantasy football, but
Yeah, well, I'm in 4 leagues. I think I can check for you, but I think I'm 2-0 in one of them, 1-1 in another. Well, let me find out exactly what's going on because we got brand new leagues. But yeah, I think I'm doing okay. I'm 1-1 in another, 1-1, 2-0, and 0-2 in my old high school league. 0-2. Not a good start in that one. And I got some injuries that I got going on too. But anyways, that's for another day. But yeah, he's excited about getting in on the fantasy football. I think I saw Tanev is in on the fantasy football team this year also. I think he said he's 1-1 as well, or was planning to be, assuming that I don't know who he said, Barkley or something had a good night tonight, which that's a conversation for another day. The Eagles absolutely pissing one away last night.
love it.
Yeah, I'm sure you do, Mr. Cowboys fan. I'm sure you do. But yeah, I fantasy football. It's funny. I've spoken to a lot of athletes, and it is a good like camaraderie building thing. It
Yeah.
really is. Like right away, you get in there, you join the fantasy football team, and it's just something you're already talking about with people. Like automatically gives you something to talk about. Who'd you draft? Who do you like this week? Who are you playing this week? It gives you a chance to chirp other guys. Like it is a really good like locker room building activity, and it goes on for months. So if you're new, getting in on it is huge. And who else is really good at fantasy football apparently, RIP, but Johnny Gaudreau. I remember I was speaking with Boone Jenner a couple of years ago when I was doing Leafs lunch, and asked him. I was just curious. I was like, "Hey, what's it like in the NHL locker room playing fantasy football?" It's like, do you guys play? Blah blah blah. He's like, "Oh yeah," and I was like, "Well, who's the sharp in the room?" And he's like, Johnny Gaudreau. He's like, I'm pretty sure he signed here because he wanted to come and take all of our money. And he's like, he won this year. He crushed us all. He's like, that guy's a machine when it comes to fantasy football. And it's funny because the every locker room has it. Every locker room's got a league or two going. And I know that Matthews is involved in the fantasy football as well. And wouldn't be surprised if Marner and Mo are also involved in some of the other leadership pieces on this Leafs team, because it is a good team bonding experience to be playing fantasy football. Yeah, so those are kind of the main takeaways. They really, spent a lot of time talking to some of the new guys and getting their thoughts on the upcoming season. The stars of the team will certainly speak with the media on Wednesday tomorrow, when training camp opens up after their physicals, and that's when Mitch Marner's going to answer the question. And Tavares too going to have to answer the same question with both of their contracts coming due at the end of the season with no extension in place. But that's a conversation we can have tomorrow, Dave. That'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on X at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow. Yep, that's right. We're back to 5 days a week here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. So make sure you're subscribed wherever you get a podcast and also up on YouTube. So again, we'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.